The diplomatic chamber aboard the Terran vessel Horizon's Edge hummed with tension as Captain Marcus Reed adjusted his dress uniform one final time. 3 years of interstellar negotiations had led to this moment, the first formal meeting between humanity and the Viridian Empire, a species that had dominated this sector of the galaxy for millennia. Through the reinforced viewport, Marcus could see the massive Viridian dreadnought Eternal Silence, its organic curves and bioluminescent panels pulsing like a living heart. The aliens had agreed to this neutral meeting after humanity's peaceful first contact protocols had impressed their advanced scouts. What they hadn't expected was the Empire's decision to send royalty. The airlock cycled with a soft hiss, and Marcus straightened as the Viridian delegation entered. He had studied their physiology extensively, but seeing them in person, still, sent a chill down his spine. The Viridians were tall, graceful beings with elongated limbs and skin that seemed to shift between deep purples and blues. But most unsettling were their faces, or rather, the complete absence of them. Where humans had eyes, nose, and mouth, the Viridians possessed only smooth, featureless surfaces that somehow conveyed emotion through subtle color changes and head movements. Leading the delegation was clearly their most important member. She moved with fluid grace, her form-fitting bio-armor marking her as high nobility. The translator device at her throat crackled to life as she approached. "I am Princess Lyra of the 7th House, daughter of Emperor Valdris." Her voice resonated with harmonics that seemed to bypass human ears and speak directly to the mind. "You are the one they call Marcus Reed." "Captain Marcus Reed, representing the Terran Federation," he replied, offering the formal bow they had agreed upon in preliminary communications. "Your Highness, we're honored by your presence." The princess tilted her head, and the smooth surface where her face should be shimmered from deep purple to a lighter violet. Marcus had learned this indicated curiosity. "Your species fascinates us, Captain Reed. You broadcast your emotions so clearly, through facial expressions, body language, even scent. We find it refreshing." The negotiations began in earnest, with both sides presenting their proposals for trade agreements and territorial boundaries. But Marcus found himself increasingly drawn to the princess herself. Despite her alien nature, there was something in her bearing, in the way she moved and spoke, that suggested depths beyond mere diplomacy. Hours passed as they hammered out preliminary agreements. The Viridians offered advanced biotechnology in exchange for human cultural artifacts and entertainment media. Apparently, they were fascinated by humanity's creative expressions. During a break in the proceedings, Princess Lyra approached Marcus privately. "Your people are remarkable," she said, the translator giving her words a warm undertone. "We have encountered many species in our expansion, but none quite like yours. There is something vibrant about humanity." Marcus found himself studying the subtle play of colors across her featureless face. "We've been told we're unusual for developing emotions and creativity alongside our technology. Most species seem to lose one or the other." Indeed. We Viridians have lived for so long that many of us have forgotten what it means to feel deeply. We experience existence, but not life, as you would understand it. Her face shifted to a deep blue that Marcus somehow interpreted as melancholy. As the day progressed, Marcus realized something unprecedented was happening. Despite their vast biological differences, despite the impossibility of reading her expressions, in human terms, he was beginning to understand Princess Lyra's emotional states. More than that, he was beginning to care about them. When the formal sessions ended and the Viridian delegation prepared to return to their ship, Princess Lyra lingered. "Captain Reed," she said quietly, "would you be willing to continue our discussions? There is much about your species, about you, that I would like to understand better." Marcus nodded, not fully comprehending that this moment would change both their species forever. Over the following weeks, as the Horizon's Edge and the Eternal Silence maintained their careful dance in the neutral zone, Marcus and Princess Lyra met daily. What had begun as diplomatic courtesy evolved into something neither had anticipated: genuine friendship, and perhaps something more. The princess had explained that Viridians experienced emotions differently than humans. Where humans felt in sharp peaks and valleys, Viridians existed in a more constant emotional state, like a gentle river rather than crashing waves. But around Marcus, Lyra found herself experiencing something new. Fluctuations that were both frightening and exhilarating. "Your species calls it falling in love," she said during one of their private conversations in the observation lounge. Her face had shifted to a warm golden hue that Marcus had learned indicated happiness mixed with uncertainty. "We have no equivalent concept. Viridians bond for political advantage or biological necessity. But this is different." Marcus stared out at the stars, processing her words. Over the past weeks, he had indeed found himself drawn to the alien princess in ways that defied logic. Her intelligence, her curiosity about humanity, the way she seemed to genuinely care about understanding his thoughts and feelings. It transcended the physical barriers between their species. "The feeling is mutual," he admitted quietly. "I've never experienced anything like this either. You're not human. But somehow you feel more real to me than anyone I've ever known." The princess moved closer, and Marcus could see the subtle bioluminescent patterns that traced along her form. Another aspect of Viridian emotion that he was slowly learning to read. "My people would not understand. The Empire has strict protocols about interspecies relationships, especially for royalty. But being with you makes me feel alive in a way I have never experienced." Their conversations had revealed the depth of their incompatibility on paper. Viridians lived for thousands of years, while humans barely reached a century. Their biologies were so different that physical intimacy as humans understood it was impossible. Yet somehow, Marcus and Lyra had found a connection that transcended these limitations. "There's something I need to show you," Lyra said, her voice taking on a resonance that bypassed the translator entirely. "Something no human has ever seen." She reached up and touched a nearly invisible seam along her throat. With a soft click, the smooth surface of her face parted, revealing the truth beneath. Marcus gasped, not in horror, but in wonder. Where he had expected to see alien features, there was instead a swirling galaxy of light, thousands of microscopic stars that danced and pulsed with her emotions. It was beautiful beyond description. "This is how we truly see," she explained, her real voice a harmony of musical tones. "These are our sensors, our true faces. We cover them because other species find them disturbing." Marcus reached out slowly, stopping just short of touching the luminous display. "It's incredible. You're incredible." The lights pulsed brighter, and Marcus could feel something he had never experienced before. A direct connection to Lyra's emotional state. Joy, fear, hope, and something deeper that he could only interpret as love flowed between them like a bridge of light. "This is impossible," Lyra whispered, both through her translator and directly into his mind. "You should not be able to interface with our neural pathways. Humans lack the necessary biological structures." But Marcus was feeling it clearly now. The depth of Lyra's emotions, her surprise at this connection, and underneath it all, a profound loneliness that spoke to something similar in his own heart. "Maybe that's what makes us special," he said. "We adapt, we connect, it's what humans do." As they stood there, hands almost touching, the space between them charged with an impossible connection, both knew they had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The implications were staggering, not just for them personally, but for both their species. Unknown to them, sensors aboard both ships had detected the unusual energy patterns emanating from their meeting. On the Viridian vessel, advisors were already preparing reports for the Emperor. On the human ship, scientists were scrambling to understand readings that should have been impossible. The bond between a human and a Viridian princess was not just a personal miracle. It was about to become a diplomatic crisis that would test both civilizations. The crisis erupted 3 days later, when Emperor Valdris himself arrived aboard a massive Imperial fleet. The sight of 200 Viridian warships dropping out of hyperspace sent the human diplomatic corps into a panic, but Marcus knew the real reason for the Emperor's presence. The bond between him and Lyra had grown stronger each day, and with it, the impossibility of hiding what they had become. Marcus stood in the conference room aboard the Eternal Silence, surrounded by Viridian nobles whose smooth faces betrayed nothing of their emotions. The Emperor himself was an imposing figure, his bio-armor more elaborate than any Marcus had seen, with organic patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living metal. "Captain Reed," the Emperor's voice carried the weight of millennia, "you have done something that our scientists believed impossible. You have formed a neural bond with my daughter, a bond that exists only between Viridians of compatible bloodlines." Princess Lyra stood beside her father, her face covered once again by the smooth mask her people wore in formal settings. But Marcus could feel her presence in his mind, a warm current of emotion that had become as natural as breathing. "Your Majesty," Marcus began carefully, "what Princess Lyra and I share was not planned or engineered. It simply happened." "Indeed." The Emperor moved closer, and Marcus could sense the ancient power that radiated from the alien ruler. "Which is why you present us with an unprecedented situation. The bond you share cannot be broken. Attempts to do so would likely kill you both. Yet the implications of a human Viridian neural link are staggering. Over the past 72 hours, teams of scientists from both species had run every test imaginable. The results were consistent and shocking. Marcus and Lyra shared a connection that allowed them to experience each other's emotions, thoughts, and even memories. It was a level of intimacy that even mated Viridian pairs rarely achieved. "The political ramifications alone could destabilize the Empire," continued one of the nobles, his face shifting to an angry red. "A human bonded to royalty? It's unprecedented, unthinkable. Yet it has happened." Lyra spoke for the first time, her voice carrying a strength that surprised everyone present. Through their bond, Marcus felt her determination, her willingness to fight for what they had found together. And it cannot be undone. The Emperor studied them both with the attention of a being who had ruled for centuries. "There are those, in my court, who would see this as an abomination. Others who would view it as an opportunity to exploit human neural plasticity for military purposes. But there is another possibility." Marcus felt Lyra's surprise echo his own. "What possibility?" "Your Majesty, that you represent something new, something that could change both our species forever." The Emperor's face had shifted to a complex pattern of colors that Marcus was beginning to recognize as deep contemplation. "Our expansion across the galaxy has been one of conquest and absorption. We have never encountered a species capable of truly bonding with us as equals." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Through their connection, Marcus could feel Lyra's growing hope mixed with fear. This could be their salvation, or their doom. "I propose an experiment," the Emperor continued. "You will both come to Viridian Prime, our capital world. There, our greatest minds will study your bond while you demonstrate what this connection could mean for our species' future. If you prove that this bond can benefit both our peoples, then perhaps we can find a way forward that honors both your connection and our respective civilizations." Marcus felt the weight of the decision. Accepting meant leaving humanity behind, potentially forever. But refusing meant losing Lyra, and he had already discovered that their bond was too strong to survive separation. "And if we prove that our connection is somehow harmful or dangerous?" Marcus asked. The Emperor's face went completely dark, an expression Marcus had learned meant finality. "Then you will be separated permanently, by whatever means necessary." Through their bond, Marcus felt Lyra's hand slip into his, though she stood too far away to touch physically. Her emotional presence wrapped around him like a warm embrace, offering strength and comfort. "We accept," Marcus said, speaking for both of them. As the meeting concluded and arrangements were made for their journey to Viridian Prime, Marcus realized that he had just agreed to become either a bridge between two species, or a cautionary tale about the dangers of reaching too far beyond one's own kind. But looking at Lyra, feeling the depth of their connection, he knew that some bonds were worth any risk. Viridian Prime defied every expectation Marcus had formed about alien worlds. Instead of the sterile metal cities he had anticipated, the capital planet was a masterpiece of biological architecture. Towering spires grew from the ground like massive trees, their surfaces pulsing with the same bioluminescent patterns he had learned to associate with Viridian emotion. The entire city seemed alive, breathing with the rhythm of its inhabitants. The Imperial Palace rose from the center of the capital like a vast organism, its organic curves and flowing lines making it appear more grown than built. As Marcus and Lyra were escorted through its corridors, he marveled at how the walls themselves seemed to respond to the presence of Viridians, glowing brighter as they passed. "It's beautiful," he whispered to Lyra through their bond, not trusting himself to speak aloud in the presence of so many Imperial guards. Her emotional response was complex, pride in her homeworld mixed with anxiety about what awaited them. "The palace has stood for 10,000 years," she replied through their connection. "It was grown from the consciousness of the first emperor, and each ruler since has added their own essence to its structure. They were housed in the Palace of Questions, a wing dedicated to scientific inquiry and experimentation. Their quarters were adjacent but separate, a compromise between their need for proximity and the court's discomfort with their unprecedented bond. The rooms themselves were marvels of bioengineering, with walls that could become transparent or opaque at will, furniture that molded itself to the occupants' needs, and environmental systems that responded to emotional states. Dr. Caney, the lead human scientist who had been granted permission to accompany them, was in a state of constant amazement. "The technology here isn't just advanced," he explained to Marcus during one of their private moments. "It's fundamentally different from anything we've developed. They've achieved a symbiosis between consciousness and matter that we can barely comprehend." The testing began immediately. Teams of Viridian researchers, working alongside Dr. Kane and his human colleagues, subjected Marcus and Lyra to every conceivable examination. Brain scans revealed neural pathways in Marcus that had never existed before, new connections that somehow allowed him to interface with Viridian consciousness. In Lyra, they found corresponding changes, as if her ancient neural structure had adapted to accommodate human emotional patterns. "Remarkable," muttered Dr. Thane, the chief Viridian researcher, his face shifting through a spectrum of colors that Marcus now recognized as scientific fascination. "Your bond has created new neural architectures in both of you. You are literally evolving to accommodate each other." But it was during the fourth day of testing that they discovered something that changed everything. During a deep neural scan, Marcus and Lyra were asked to maintain their emotional connection, while researchers monitored their brain activity. As they fell into the familiar rhythm of shared consciousness, something unexpected happened. Dr. Kane's eyes widened as he stared at his instruments. "Marcus, you need to see this. Your neural activity isn't just connecting with Lyra, it's connecting with the palace itself." The revelation sent shockwaves through the research team. The palace, like all Viridian architecture, was partially conscious, a living entity that responded to the emotional states of its inhabitants. But Marcus, through his bond with Lyra, was somehow able to interface directly with this consciousness. "This is unprecedented." Dr. Thane's face had gone through so many color changes that it resembled a sunset. "No non-Viridian has ever been able to commune with our living architecture. If this ability can be replicated..." The implications were staggering. Human neural plasticity, combined with Viridian biotechnology, could create possibilities that neither species had imagined alone. But it also meant that Marcus and Lyra were no longer unique anomalies. They were potentially the first of a new kind of being. Word of the discovery reached the Emperor within hours. That evening, as Marcus and Lyra shared a quiet moment in her quarters, feeling the palace's consciousness humming softly around them like a lullaby, they knew their lives had changed forever. "We're not just bonded anymore," Lyra said, her real face revealed, the galaxy of lights swirling with emotions too complex for words. "We're becoming something new." Marcus reached out, his hand stopping just short of her luminous features, feeling the warmth of her consciousness against his palm. "Are you frightened?" "Terrified," she admitted, and through their bond he felt the depth of her fear mixed with wonder. "But also hopeful. What we've become could be the key to something beautiful between our peoples." Outside their window, the capital city pulsed with bioluminescent life, and for the first time since arriving on Viridian Prime, Marcus felt like he might actually be coming home. The Emperor's summons came at dawn, delivered by a procession of royal guards, whose bio-armor gleamed with ceremonial patterns. Marcus and Lyra were escorted to the Chamber of Resonance, the heart of the Imperial Palace, where the most important decisions of the Empire were made. The chamber itself was a marvel, a vast spherical room whose walls pulsed with the accumulated consciousness of every Viridian ruler throughout history. Emperor Valdris stood at the chamber's center, surrounded by the circle of wisdom. 12. Ancient Viridians whose faces bore the deep purple hues of those who had lived for millennia. The air hummed with their combined presence, and Marcus could feel the weight of their attention like a physical force. "My daughter, Captain Reed," the Emperor began, his voice resonating through the living walls. "Your bond has revealed possibilities we had not imagined. But before we can determine what role you might play in our empire's future, you must prove that your connection serves a greater purpose than mere personal affection." Through their bond, Marcus felt Lyra's spike of anxiety. This was the moment they had both dreaded. The test that would determine not just their fate, but potentially the relationship between their two species. "What would you have us do, Your Majesty?" Marcus asked, surprised by the steadiness of his own voice. One of the Circle of Wisdom stepped forward, her ancient form bearing the elaborate biomechanical augmentations of a High Minister. "The Outer Rim territories have been experiencing unrest. The Zephyrin Collective, a species we conquered 3 centuries ago, has been organizing resistance movements. Traditional diplomatic and military approaches have failed to resolve the situation." Marcus felt a chill of understanding. They were being asked to serve as negotiators, to use their unique bond to bridge the gap between species that had been enemies for generations. "The Zephyrins are a proud people," Emperor Valdris continued. "They have never accepted Viridian rule, viewing us as conquerors rather than liberators. Perhaps a human perspective, combined with Viridian authority, could find a path to genuine peace." The mission was more dangerous than it appeared on the surface. If Marcus and Lyra succeeded, they would demonstrate the value of their bond and potentially secure their future together. But if they failed, it would prove that their connection was merely a romantic curiosity with no practical application to the Empire's needs. "We accept," Lyra said, her voice carrying the authority of her royal bloodline. Through their bond, Marcus felt her determination mixed with fear, not for herself, but for him. The Zephyrin territories were far from Viridian Prime, and if something went wrong, they would be alone. The journey to the Outer Rim took 3 weeks aboard the Imperial vessel Transcendence. During the trip, Marcus and Lyra studied everything they could about Zephyrin culture and history. The Zephyrins were a silicon-based species, their crystalline forms capable of existing in environments that would kill most organic life. They had been spacefaring for millennia before the Viridians arrived, and their resentment of conquest ran deep. "They see us as soft-bodied invaders," Lyra explained as they reviewed diplomatic files. "To them, organic life is inherently inferior. The fact that we defeated them militarily only adds to their sense of injustice." Marcus studied the tactical reports from previous negotiations. Every attempt at diplomacy is focused on Viridian superiority, offering them better technology, improved living conditions, integration into the Empire. But what if that's exactly the wrong approach? Through their bond, he felt Lyra's curiosity spark. "What do you mean?" "What if instead of trying to convince them that Viridian rule is beneficial, we acknowledge that their resentment is justified? What if we approach them not as conquerors offering gifts, but as equals seeking understanding?" The concept was radical for the Viridian Empire, which had expanded across the galaxy through a combination of superior technology and cultural assimilation. The idea of approaching a conquered species as equals was unprecedented. When they reached the Zephyrin territories, the situation was even more volatile than the reports had indicated. 3 Viridian administrative centers had been attacked in the past month, and the local military commander was requesting permission to implement martial law. "Commander Dex," Lyra addressed the local Viridian authority, "will need to meet with the Zephyrin leadership directly. No guards, no show of force. Just the 2 of us." The commander's face shifted to deep red, alarm and disapproval. "Your Highness, that would be extremely dangerous. The Zephyrins have made it clear they consider all Viridians to be enemies." Marcus stepped forward. "That's exactly why it needs to be us. Our bond allows us to communicate in ways that transcend normal diplomatic channels. If there's any chance of reaching them, this is it." As they prepared for what could be their final mission together, Marcus and Lyra both knew they were about to discover whether their impossible love could truly change the course of galactic history. The Zephyrin settlement of Kithara was a marvel of crystalline architecture. its geometric structures rising from the desert like frozen music. As Marcus and Lyra approached the meeting site in an unarmed transport, the tension was palpable. Through the viewport, they could see Zephyrin warriors positioned along the settlement's perimeter, their silicon-based forms glinting in the harsh, sunlight like living gemstones. "Last chance to reconsider," Marcus said quietly, though he already knew through their bond that Lyra was as determined as he was. "We've come too far to turn back now," she replied, her face showing the warm gold that indicated resolve mixed with affection. "Besides, I can feel your confidence. If you believe this can work, then so do I." The Zephyrin delegation waited in the central plaza, their leader immediately recognizable by the complex fractal patterns etched into his crystalline form. Archon Kalos had ruled this sector for over 2 centuries, and his hatred of Viridian occupation was legendary throughout the Outer Rim. "Princess Lyra," Kalos spoke through a harmonic resonance that bypassed the need for translation devices, his voice like wind chimes in a storm. "You honor us with your presence, though I confess surprise at your choice of companion." Marcus stepped forward, acutely aware that his soft organic form must seem alien and vulnerable to these silicon-based beings. "Archon Kalos, I am Captain Marcus Reed of the Terran Federation. I've come to speak not as a representative of the Viridian Empire, but as someone who understands what it means to be different." The Archon's form shifted, light refracting through his crystalline structure in patterns that Marcus was beginning to recognize as curiosity. "A human. We have heard of your species, organic beings who somehow developed space travel despite your obvious physical limitations. Yet you travel with a Viridian princess. Are you merely another conquered species, seeking favor with your masters?" Through their bond, Marcus felt Lyra's flash of anger at the insult, but also her understanding of why he had asked her to remain silent during the opening exchanges. "3 months ago, I would have said the same thing," Marcus replied honestly. "I saw the Viridians as just another alien species to be negotiated with or defended against, but something changed when I met Princess Lyra. Something that I think you might understand better than most." He took a breath, knowing that everything depended on the next few moments. "You were a free people before the Viridians came. You had your own culture, your own way of understanding the universe. When they conquered you, they didn't just take your territory, they took your identity. They tried to make you into something you're not." The Archon's form went completely still, the only movement the slow pulse of light through his crystalline structure. Around the plaza, the other Zephyrins had grown equally motionless, their attention focused entirely on Marcus's words. "But here's what I've learned," Marcus continued. "Sometimes the greatest strength comes from accepting what makes us different, not trying to eliminate those differences. Princess Lyra and I should be incompatible. Our species are so different that most would say any connection between us is impossible. Yet we've formed a bond that has changed both of us in ways we're still discovering." For the first time since they had arrived, Lyra spoke. "Archon Kalos, my people have made a fundamental error in our approach to the Zephyrins. We have tried to integrate you into our empire by making you more like us. But what if instead we learn to become more like you?" The revolutionary suggestion sent ripples of shock through both delegations. A Viridian princess proposing that her species should adapt to accommodate a conquered people was unprecedented in the Empire's history. Kalos finally moved, his form shifting to catch the light in new patterns. "Explain." Marcus felt the moment of opportunity and seized it. "What if we proposed a new model for the Outer Rim territories? Not integration into the Viridian Empire, but a true partnership between species. Zephyrin knowledge of crystalline technology combined with Viridian bioengineering. Human adaptability serving as a bridge between different forms of consciousness." Through their bond, he felt Lyra's sudden understanding of his plan, followed by her amazement at its audacity. He was proposing nothing less than a fundamental restructuring of how the Empire dealt with other species. "You speak of partnership," Kalos said slowly. "But what assurance do we have that this is not simply another form of control?" It was Lyra who answered, and as she spoke, she reached out to touch Marcus's hand. The moment their skin made contact, something extraordinary happened. The bond between them, usually invisible to others, suddenly manifested as a visible field of energy that surrounded them both. The effect was dramatic. A human and a Viridian, two completely different forms of life, united by something that transcended their physical differences. "This is our assurance," Lyra said, her voice carrying new harmonics that seemed to resonate with the Zephyrins' crystalline forms. "What Captain Reed and I share cannot be faked or controlled. It exists because we chose to see past our differences, to find something greater. We offer the same choice to you." The Archon stepped closer, his form now pulsing with colors that Marcus somehow understood indicated deep contemplation. "You would risk the stability of your empire for the sake of beings you have conquered?" "We would risk everything," Marcus replied, "for the chance to build something better than either of our species could achieve alone." As the negotiations continued into the night, with both sides working to hammer out the details of an unprecedented agreement, Marcus and Lyra knew they had crossed another threshold. Their bond had become more than a personal connection. It had become a template for a new kind of galactic civilization. 6 months after the historic Zephyrin Accords, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the newly christened vessel Unity, watching as the first joint Viridian-Zephyrin human research station took shape in the space between their worlds. The station itself was a miracle of cooperative engineering, crystalline Zephyrin mathematics providing the structural framework, Viridian biotechnology creating the living systems, and human innovation binding it all together into something greater than the sum of its parts. The transformation had been swift and profound. News of the successful negotiations had spread throughout the Empire, inspiring other conquered species to request similar accords. The rigid hierarchy that had defined Viridian civilization for millennia was giving way to something unprecedented. A true multi-species confederation, based on mutual respect rather than dominance. "The Emperor wants to see us," Lyra said, joining him at the viewport. Even after all these months, Marcus still felt the familiar flutter of connection when she approached. Their bond as strong as ever, but now deepened by shared purpose. They found Emperor Valdris in his private study, a chamber that had been significantly modified since their first meeting. Where once it had been a shrine to Viridian superiority, it now displayed artifacts and artworks from dozens of species. The change reflected the transformation of the man himself, and of the empire he ruled. "My daughter, Captain Reed," the Emperor greeted them, his face showing the complex patterns that Marcus had learned indicated profound satisfaction, mixed with uncertainty. "The Council of Worlds has ratified the Confederation Charter. As of today, the Viridian Empire officially becomes the Galactic Confederation of Free Worlds." Marcus felt Lyra's surge of joy through their bond, matched by his own amazement at how far they had all come. "Your Majesty," he said, "you've changed the course of galactic history." "No," the Emperor replied, moving to look out at the construction beyond. "You have. Your bond, this impossible connection between species, has shown us that our greatest strength lies not in conquest, but in cooperation. You have given us a new way to see the universe." The past months had been a whirlwind of diplomacy, negotiation, and occasionally conflict. Not all Viridians had embraced the new order, and several noble houses had attempted to stage a coup, to restore the old empire. But the growing alliance between former enemies had proven stronger than reactionary resistance. Species that had been enemies for centuries were finding common ground through the model that Marcus and Lyra had established. "There is one more matter," the Emperor continued, and Marcus felt Lyra's sudden spike of attention. "The Council has voted to create a new position, Ambassador of Interspecies Relations. The role would involve traveling between worlds, establishing new protocols for cooperation, and serving as a living example of what different species can achieve together." Marcus understood immediately. "You're offering us the position. I am offering it to you both. Together. The Council recognizes that your bond is not just personal. It represents something essential to our new civilization. You would report directly to me, with authority to negotiate on behalf of the entire Confederation." Through their connection, Marcus felt Lyra's complex emotions, excitement, fear, hope, and love all swirling together like a galaxy of feeling. The position would mean leaving behind any hope of a normal life, but it would also allow them to continue building the bridge between species that had become their shared purpose. "We accept," they said in unison, their voices harmonizing in a way that still surprised listeners. As they made their way back to their quarters to begin planning their first diplomatic mission, Marcus reflected on the impossibility of their journey. 6 months ago, he had been a simple starship captain, representing a young species taking its first tentative steps into the galaxy. Now he was part of something unprecedented, a bond that had transformed not just two individuals, but the entire structure of galactic civilization. "Do you ever regret it?" Lyra asked quietly as they walked through corridors that now bustled with beings from dozens of different species. "Giving up your old life for this uncertain future?" Marcus paused to watch a group of young Zephyrins learning to communicate with Viridian biocomputers, their crystalline forms reflecting the bioluminescent displays in patterns of pure beauty. Nearby, a human engineer was explaining some mechanical principle to a fascinated audience of mixed species, using the universal language of discovery and wonder. "Never," he said, taking Lyra's hand and feeling the familiar warmth of their connection flow between them. "We've helped create something beautiful." As they continued toward their quarters, their bond humming with shared contentment, neither of them noticed the small group of children from various species who had stopped to watch them pass. To these youngsters, growing up in the new Confederation, the sight of a human and a Viridian walking hand in hand was not impossible or strange. It was simply normal. It was the future they were inheriting, a future where difference was celebrated rather than conquered. The human who bonded with the faceless alien princess had become something more than a love story. It had become the foundation myth of a new kind of civilization. One where the greatest strength came not from sameness, but from the courage to reach across the void between different forms of consciousness and find the connection that made them all, fundamentally, alive. In the end, perhaps that was what made humans special in the galaxy. Not their technology or their adaptability, but their persistent belief that any gap could be bridged, any difference overcome, and any heart touched, if one was willing to try.